Hi, this is Kevin Trainer, and I want to welcome you to my tutorial for the uh, Pagination coding assignment. This is part of the Easy University series of tutorials, and it is correlated with chapter 14 in the Pinkham book, Django Unleashed, which happens to deal with the Django pagination feature. Coming into this assignment, we've just completed the migrations assignment, and because of that, we have kind of cleaned up our approach to semesters, where semesters are made up of years and calendar periods, although that's happening kind of under the covers to the application that we see here. And we managed to make that change in the schema, and we also managed to populate our database, so it has all the traditional spring, summer, fall semesters for 2017 through 2020. Okay, and so we're coming into pagination, and so what exactly are we going to paginate? Well, pagination makes sense when you have a really long list. Okay, so it's really the pages that are a list that lend themselves to pagination. So we have instructors, sections, courses, semesters, students. And so right now, with the data that we have, there isn't anything that really needs to be paginated, right? We just have a sort of less than one page of data for everything. And so then the question is, well, which ones are we going to want to paginate? And potentially all of them, although there are times when at some point, probably not in this version of the course, but at some point I'm going to add some search features to this, in which case we might be able to go right to the part of the list that we want and not have to worry about pagination per se. But so I don't think I want to paginate everything. And what I've decided is I'm going to do instructors and students. Okay. Students we're clearly going to have several pages of, and instructors are just a lot like students, and I decided to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the work for instructors, and then I'm going to have you go off on your own and do the work for students on your own. Okay? So what's the first thing that we're going to do? Well, the first thing we're going to do, we probably should have done as part of the migrations, and that is this. Okay? We don't have enough test data with either instructors or students to force page breaks, because we've only got about say 10 to 20 of each. Okay, and that's not enough. Typically on a page you might have say 25 or 30 or something like that. We're going to pick 25 because it's an easy number. And so we would want to have a minimum of, say, 3 pages. And I'm thinking we should have 5. So what I'd like to do is to add 125 more instructors and 125 more students. And gee, this would have been a great thing for us to have done when we did the assignment for migrations. So we're kind of playing catch up here, but this is what we're going to do. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through the instructors. Okay, so let's take a look at, let's bring over a couple of files and we'll talk about how we could get ourselves another 125 instructors. Okay, be right back. Okay, so let's take a look at the migrations. Okay, so the last migration that we did as part of the migrations assignment was this 0005 semester changes. And this was a real pretty challenging migration where we actually changed the schema and we converted the data and we did all that kind of stuff. So that's the last thing that we've done. And that's already applied. So we want to have a data migration for instructors. And so it's going to be called 0006 instructor data. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that over already baked. Okay, so let me just show you that. Oh, I'm changing the way I'm doing this. So 006 is student data. So I'm going to show you student data. Okay. And then I'm going to have you do the instructor data. I'm sorry we did it in the other direction. Aren't we silly? All right. So we're going to copy that out of the other project, and we're just going to put it in here. All right. All right. And I don't know where that went because it doesn't act like it went right there. I'm going to go find it. I shall return. Okay. I found it and I've brought it over. So again, I'm going to walk you through the student data, and we're gonna have you do the instructor data on your own. So this program that we have here, I generated the shell for 006 student data, the typical way that we learned with when we were working on the migrations. And so I have the classic list up front called students in all caps because it's a constant. And it has a list with 125 new students. And the fields for student are first name, last name, and nickname. And I decided because the data generator that I used only it generated first and last name, I decided all these would not have a nickname. Okay? And all right, well, it makes sense. So let's go down and look where we are here. Now let's go down and look in the bottom. So here's the migrations class. Okay. And it says that it depended upon course info 0005, and fine, that's the last one that we've applied. That's good. And the only operation is this run Python, and we have an add student data and a remove student data. Okay, so let's look at add student data and remove student data. This is a little tricky because of the following things. I generated these names randomly. Okay, I found a nice little website. I'm not trying to advertise for them, but give credit where credit is due. I Googled person name generators, and I came up with fake name generator. It's a part of homepage.net. And you tell it how many names you want. You can get up to 4,000 of them. And whether you want female or male and female, which is what I took. And you can control the names that they choose from. It does say somewhere in the documentation that the names are pretty good, but they're all kind of English or British, and they probably are. So those are the first names, and these are the last names. Okay, so it's not highly It's not highly probable, but it's possible that you might, in a list of 125 names, you might actually create a duplicate. Okay? And if you've already got data in your database, you may also have a duplicate. Okay? So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't adding a duplicate of a name that I already have there. I don't think we've prevented that from happening because there are duplicate names in the world. But I didn't want to create that with my test data. So that's how I generated the data. Okay. When I generated the data, I got well, let me show you. I just got a window with the data into it, with the data in it. Did my generate names, and here, oh, I thought they came up first. So where are the names? Oh, 0 names. So I did 125 names, generate names, and there they are. There's 128 of them, and I don't know why Deirdre Hamilton doesn't have, I don't know why a lot of these things don't look right. I think we're going to have to refresh our page. I didn't have this problem. So we're going to resend this. And there we go. We've got names that have got spaces in them. I think when we tried to generate 0 names before, I think we weirded out the page. Okay, so that's how I got the names, and I copied them and I pasted them into a text editor. And what I got was a file that looks like this. Let me go find it. Okay, so here's the file I found. I pasted it just into the project. And it's called teststudentnames.txt. Okay, and when you open that up, you'll see it has 125 names in a plain old text file. Okay. And what I needed to get was, I needed to get it into this kind of format where each of the names look like one of the entries up here. Make sense? All right. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to read a line, and then I wanted to put out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines to an output file. Okay. So I would have all this wonderful little data. So for every line in the input file, I wanted to create a group of lines like this in the output file. And then I pasted them into my migration file. Okay, so how did I do that? Well, I did that with a Python program. So where's my Python program that did that? It should be right here. Here it is. So let me copy that and paste it in here. Okay. And this is a textbook level problem where you're reading an input file that you provide the name of. Teststudentnames.txt. You're generating an output file that you provide the name of, and you just have to open the input file, open the output file, and iterate over the file, taking each line and splitting it into first name and last name, and then writing out the entry that you would like in your test code. So you take something like this and you give it a run. Okay. And let's run that. And it says the student names have been written to student names Python code.txt. And that should be in our project now. And there it is. Let's open that up. And there they are. Okay. So I'm going to give you the names file that I generated for the instructors, and I'm going to want you to adapt the Python from generate student test data to generate instructor test data, and to generate the entries that go into the migration code. Now, the one part of the migration code I haven't really gone through with you that bears some analysis are the routines for add and delete. Okay, so we add and remove, and it's really a typical loop. Except for the following thing. I checked for whether I was creating a duplicate. Okay. So what I did is every time I went to add, I checked for a duplicate first with a try except block. Okay. And if I got the error, if I got the object does not exist, well, then I just added the student to the database. If, on the other hand, I already had that student, it was a duplicate it was already there from my prior test data, or there was a duplicate in my test data, I printed out a warning and the name. Okay, and my idea was if I had duplicates, I would go back and change the test data so that I wasn't creating any duplicates and run it again. Okay, so that's really the only thing that we're doing. If we do that, well, then the last time that we run the forward migration for 0006, we're not going to have any duplicates, which means that when we go to back it out, we're not going to have a problem with duplicates, and we're going to do just fine because the backout is just a typical loop. Okay, so that's how we did all that, and that's how we got all that done. So let me close a few things here. Let's close that and let's run that migration. Okay, so come up here, run manage Py, and we're going to say show migrations. And you can see that we have an 005 and we have an 006, but 0006 hasn't been run yet. So let's say migrate course info 0006. And it looks like it ran just fine. So let's do the following thing. Let's check that we can get it to back out just fine. So we're just going to say migrate course info 0005. Does it go back? Yeah, looks good. It's unapplying 0006. And let's just do a show migrations. Okay. And it's backed off. Well, that's good. But we really want it applied. So we're going to apply it again. 0006. Now, I just, as I mentioned, when we were working on the migrations, these data migrations with test data, they're good for doing testing, but of course you're not going to want to apply those migrations to your production database. So probably before we go too far on, before we do a proper schema migration for the database and go further, we would probably come back to this 0006 student data and permanently back it out. We'd probably do the same for 0007 instructor data. Okay, because you wouldn't want to apply them to your production database. Okay, but they're going to be great for what we want to test next. Okay, so let's do a run server and just see those students that we have out there. Okay, so let's go to students. And now you can see we've got a lot of students. And one of the reasons you really want to do pagination is, we don't have a lot of pretty, we haven't done a lot of styling and layout here with CSS. We haven't really done any. But you begin to lose the effectiveness of a page as you get too far away from the top of the page. You've got columns, you've got column headers, you've got all that kind of stuff, and then you just don't see once you get down about so far. So what we're going to do is we're going to show 25 of these on a page, okay, and we're only going to show we're only going to we're going to do the pagination in just about the way that you would expect. Okay, so let's do that. Simple pagination for students. All right. So let's look at the various parts. Let's look at URLs. Okay. So in the Pinkham book by chapter 14, he's already broken up the URL patterns into another bunch of subsets, and we haven't done that yet, nor are we going to do that now. But if we look at student list here, okay, let's just take a look at that. Here are all the URLs for student, and the first one is for student list, and we want to have the typical beginning of the URL /student $, okay, and we are going to have coming after the student slash, we are going to have a parameter. So there's going to be when you look at the URL string in the browser address bar, you are going to see a question mark and then PAGE equals and then the number, 2, 3, whatever. Okay, but all that PAGE stuff is not part of the URL proper. So it turns out that the URL entry that we have in urls.py is fine the way it is. You only need to muck with that if you're going to try to do this in the URL string proper, which again is not what really Pinkham recommends, and it's not what I recommend either. Okay, so no change to urls.py. Okay, so then we go to views.py, and let's go down and take a look at student list. Okay, and we're actually ahead of Pinkham in that we've already taken all of our views and turned them into class-based views. He still had some function-based views left, but we haven't had them for a long time. Okay, so we're not going to have to do the conversion that he does from a function-based view to a class-based view, but we've got a very simple view here for student list. We're only expecting to get a get, which makes sense because we're going to be clicking on a link, and it's that link that is going to generate a get. And what we're going to do is we're going to want this to be more sophisticated. So what do we want it to look like? Well, it's not going to be too surprising, because what we're going to do is we're going to have a code that's going to look a lot like that code that came from chapter 14. Okay, so let me show you this. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it out of my already baked version, and I'm just going to plunk it in, and then we're going to walk through it. Okay, so we're going to come here, and we're going to delete this one and paste the other one in, and it's considerably bigger, right? So one of the first things that we see is there seem to be some classes that are not recognized because they're coming out of the paginator features, and we don't have the imports. So I'm going to go to each of these, and I'm going to do Alt-Enter, and I'm just going to do the standard importing on them. And I think that's all the imports that we need. Okay. So one of the things I really like about this approach to pagination is that what we're essentially doing is we're taking our query set that we get back. In this case, we have the standard query set for a student list is to get all the objects. And what we're doing is we're wrapping that in a paginator, which is a very classy version of the student list. So we're going to give it enough information to take the student list and break it up into pages. So what we've really done is that we've taken a capability from the model, which is a query set, and we've wrapped it in a fancy wrapper that gives us paging features on it, so that we can get the entries not of all of the objects, but the objects for the particular page that we're interested in. And that's where the beauty of this approach actually works. So we do the call. Okay. So we create a paginator, and we pass it to students, and the paginate by, which is our variable that holds the number of students per page, and right now we're using 25. And then paginator is really a more functional paginated student list. Okay, so we've actually paginated the data source, which makes it a whole lot easier to do the rendering. Here is the code where we go out into the request. We do request.get, and that says we're dealing with an HTTP GET request, and then we want to get out of that request, we want to get the parameter that has the name of the keyword argument that we're using for paging. And we've already set up here in a really sort of a maintainable way that that's just going to be PAGE. So what we're expecting to get up there is PAGE equal and then some appropriate integer. Okay? So that's how we get the page number. Now, Pinkham has a really good description in chapter 14 there. It is chapter 14, right? I'm going to go right ahead and say it's chapter 14. I don't have it in front of me. But here's a really good description of why we want to do that. And he has a particularly good description of how we can just ask for this keyword argument. And if it turns out that we don't have a proper page number in the request, like for instance, they didn't do a page request. They're asking for the whole list. Okay. If it's possible that we did that, he's going to give us the behavior that we want. So he says here, try to have the page that we're getting use the page number that we hope that we got passed. And if we didn't get past a proper page number, then this is a case where we didn't really put a page equal there at all. It's just we're asking for the whole list, in which case we're going to ask for page 1. Okay. If in fact what happens is we've asked for a page that's off the end of our list. So let's say we've got 6 pages and we ask for 7. We're going to get back, it's going to raise an empty page. In that case, we're going to give it the last page. And how do we do that? Well, we just ask for the number of pages from the paginator and we use that. That's the last page, because this is one of the few things in Python that begin counting with 1. And I think that makes a lot of sense because people do count pages beginning at 1. There's nobody who counts pages beginning at 0. I would argue that there's nobody who counts anything beginning at 0 except the people who did that in this programming languages and the other ones that it follows, like C and Java and JavaScript. Okay, so that's how we get the right page number. Okay, and then we have to decide if there is going to be a previous URL link, and we decide that in the view. Okay, so if we're going to have a previous URL, then we create enough information to build that in the template. If not, then we send a message that we're not going to build it in the template. And the same thing for next. If we're already on the last page, we don't want a next link. If we're not on the last page, then we want to figure that out. So the beautiful thing that we do here is that really all the decision making for this is done in the view. And I can't say enough about how that's a good design. Could somebody argue for doing this in the template? I think they could. They'd just be wrong. This is where it really belongs. Certainly in model view controller inspired architecture, this is where it belongs. And here we are. We create the context and we're loading it up with all the things that we've kind of pre-calculated, whether it's paginated at all. What's the next page URL? We pass the paginator. What's the previous page URL? What's the student? This is the student list. Um, this is a name that we've been using all along, but what are we passing? Well, we're passing the wrapped one. We're passing a page. Okay, it's a student list, but it's a student list with special features. Okay, does the does it make a difference? Yeah, it does, because we're not going to render the entire student list, just this page of it. And then, of course, we call render. All right. Okay, so that looks good. Okay. Then we've got to make changes in our template. So let's go find our template. Student list template, student list.html is right here. And we're going to put the code at the bottom. So let me copy this from my already baked version. Okay. And I think we want one more blank line in there. And let's just put this in. Okay. So here's what we say. Okay. So we're saying, I think we want to be back there with that. So we say, if this is paginated, then we want to put out the pagination links. But if it's not, then we don't even want to put out the pagination links. Okay, we don't even want to see that. Okay. If there's a previous page URL, then we want to render it. Okay. If not, we're not going to put anything there. If there's a then we're going to say page, whatever the page number is of whatever the number of pages is. And if there's a next, well, we're going to render the link for the next. Okay? And it's really easy to write the code because we've done all the heavy lifting in the view. Okay? Here we just have to figure out how to render some information that it's kind of been pre-cooked for us in the view, and that's a beautiful decision. And then we come to the end if, and then we come to the end block. So let's look at this. Okay, that should be all the changes that we need to make. All right, and I'm just going to try to get down here. Here we are. Let's close that. Run server. Oh, I guess we could have just gone right back to that run server. Okay. So let's do a couple of things. Yeah, let's do the run server first. Okay. So do the run server. And there we go. And we come up. That's looking good. Let's go to students. And what do we have? Well, we've got page 1 of 6. Well, that makes sense because we had some data before we started, before we added the 125 new students. 125 new students is exactly 5 pages, so you would expect us to have 5 whole pages in one partial page. And we can go through these. Next, we're on page 2. Next, we're on page 3. We're on page 4. We're on page 5. We're on page 6. And you notice when we get to page 6, there's no next link. And if we previous our way all the way back, when we get to page 1, there'll be no previous link. It's really beautiful. No previous link. So the one thing we haven't tested is what if we don't have enough students for pagination. Well, I guess we probably should have tested that before we added all the students, okay? So how can we test that? Well, let's just go back and do the migration backwards, all right? So let's show migrations. Okay, and you can see where we have applied 0006 student data. So we want to unapply it. Migrate course info 0005. Okay, that's good. And now we run the server here. And let's take a look at what happens when we ask for the student list now. There's no pagination at all. So you don't see the pagination apparatus until we're actually doing pagination. It's really beautiful. It's very nice, clean, everything in the proper place kind of solution. So I've shown you this much, so I want you to take the time to catch up with this. And then when you're done with that, I want you to come along and do the same thing for instructors. Okay? So what have we got here? Well, first of all, we've got some test data for instructors. So I have a file that I'm going to give you, and I'm going to bring over and put in this project so you can see it. Paste it. And it's called Test Instructor Names. Okay. So the thing to remember here is this is a different set of names, because we don't want the instructors to be the same as the students, although that can occasionally happen with graduate student TAs, but generally speaking, it doesn't. Okay, so we have this, but when we go to generate the data for the migration, we have to remember that even though the code that we're coding, student names, generate student test data, we're going to want to clone this into generate instructor test data. We're going to have to remember that we're not making up a blank nickname. Apart from that, it's going to be pretty much the same. We're just going to clone this. We're going to clone this 006 student data migration into 007 instructor data. And we're going to have to remember to change the dependencies and all of that stuff. And then the data, where's that going to come? Well, we're going to generate that with our handy dandy Python program. Okay, so we're going to have that all done. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pause here so you can go do any work you have remaining on this on the students, and then go on and do the same thing for the instructors. So we've got two paginated pages, And then when I come back, I'm going to show you that I've got this all in my solution. So I've got the pagination for both. So I'm going to put you on hold until you're ready to see the final solution here, and I'll see you in a few. Okay, we're back, and hoping that what you were able to do was to put together a migration for instructor data, an 0007 instructor data migration, and apply that, and make changes to views .py to include an upgraded instructor list view, and make changes to instructor list.html to include the apparatus at the bottom for pagination. So if you've done that, then you ought to be able to run the testing. And here's my testing. So I click on this, and I have the migrations all done. So I have a lot of instructors. So I go to look at this, and okay, yeah, page 1 of 6. This is just what I wanted to see. As you can see on page 1, there's no link for previous. And then the next is page 2 of 6. And then the next is 3 of 6. And 4 of 6. And 5 of 6. And 6 of 6, the short page that accounts for all the data we had in the system before we added all this test data. And then we can work our way back. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And again, when we get there, there's no previous link. And the other thing that I want to do is I want to back off the migrations and just show that without the extra data, we don't get pagination features at all. So let's there's the cursor. Let's start up this manage Pi again, and let's say show migrations, and you can see that both 6 and 7 are applied, and let's unapply both of them. So we're going to say migrate course info 0005. And they both apply. They both unapplied, which is good. So let's run server. And I believe I already showed you that with the student data, that there weren't going to be any pagination features there. They don't appear when you don't have more than a page of students. And let's just confirm that's also true of instructors, and it is. So very nice. So at this point, I'm going to leave these unapplied until we have a reason to want to bring back that data. Again, I don't want them to kind of get caught in the chain of migrations for when I have a real schema migration down the road. And I don't want this to be part of the changes that I apply eventually on my production server. Okay? So that's it for this pagination assignment. And I'm going to say bye until next time. Bye-bye.